Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rahul Mital, and I'll be talking about after-treatment architecture suitable for Euro 6/BS6 applications. My co-authors on this work are Gongshin Hui, Ki Hong Kim, and Dave Brown. Myself, I'm in GM Powertrain in US. Gongxing is in research and development. Ki Hong Kim is in GM Korea, and Dave Brown is in world of systems calibration. So quite a group of people, as you will see the presentation. I'm going to talk about more data and less controversial topics. Um, so before I begin, I just wanted to share one small piece of story. I have a teenage son, and I'm sure many of you have teenagers. And the biggest challenge, he's a very good kid. The biggest challenge I face with him is just waking him up in the morning. Before noon, waking him up is like achieving Euro 7 right now. So yesterday, was it yesterday or day before? I'm forgetting the time now, but he sends me this cartoon and I was very pleased. I said, "Hey, maybe I got into him and he's motivated now." And then I continue and it says, so with that, I like to keep these, okay, thank you. Keep the presentations a little light. Of course, you will see a lot of data. By light, I don't mean that it won't be informative, but I think these sessions get too intense. And so, coming back to the presentation, I'll be talking about after-treatment architectures. Since a lot of the Euro 6 or BS6 stuff will be focused at least somewhat on SCRs, I will focus a lot on SCR characterization work that we have done. The objective here is to try and share with you the learnings that we have already gained through our existing systems. A lot of you already talked about or mentioned SCR on filter, and that's definitely a future for after treatment. Then particulate filters already in production in many parts of the world. I want to share some particular experiences we have had, then diagnostic considerations in summary. So quite a bit of an outline. We'll start with after treatment architecture options. Not maybe new in any way for anyone, but just to summarize that one of the main reasons this has become important is our emission compliance over the whole engine map. In the past, we were doing NEDC or MVEC cycle, and then people realized, hey, we are not covering the whole map. So even when you are compliant on the NEDC cycle, as soon as you get outside, you are not emission compliant and you're not as environmentally friendly. So RDE discussion started and so on. In parallel, for the dyno or chassis dyno testing, WLTC cycle was developed. Now another cycle, the CADC, is also under consideration to try and cover the whole map. And then of course on top of it, there'll be the RDE emission testing. To achieve these norms, future norms and current norms, there are lots of architectures under consideration. And I'll try to go through them quickly because I know most of you are very familiar with this, but there is a very common Euro 6 architecture today for light duty vehicles and LNT DPF system. Uh, there is also DOC DPF and underfloor SCR systems. These are both Euro 6 compliant systems for Euro 6A and B and in production already. There is another architecture which is being used for ULEV 125 in North America. I don't know of any such architecture in Europe at this moment, which is the third in the chart, the DOC SCR and DOC DPF system. There is an additional hydrocarbon injector shown in red, which basically helps with the DPF regeneration and reducing potential for oil dilution during DPF regeneration. And the one at the bottom is an enhanced LNT DPF system with a passive SCR underfloor, trying to take advantage of any ammonia slip coming from the LNT. Each of these systems has its own merits. There is obviously cost, packaging, and calibration considerations to be made, and I tried to list some of the pros and cons on the right. As we head towards our future architectures, SCR on filter seems to be a very prominent path. I apologize about the font. It reformatted itself. So the DOC SCR on filter is a very common architecture that you have heard or will be hearing very soon. It's a close couple package, so obviously both SCR and DPF take advantage of the heat from the engine. Another architecture which has a little more potential is LNT SCR on filter, but then now you have to regenerate the LNT as well, and increases complexity of calibration. Also, of course, it could add a little bit of cost for additional sensors. Enhancing both these above systems, you can add an underfloor SCR or oxidation catalyst for the urea, and that helps both the DOC and LNT system, but again, some cost implications are there. I put 2 stars on the bottom two because when I do a market survey, it looks like these are the architectures which seem to be most promising for future Euro 6, which I assume some of it will transfer to Bharat Stage 6 and will end up with the similar architectures. Uh, there are other variations also of this with potential electrical heating on the system that could be applied, which then can enhance the system performance. Um, Next, I will move to XCR characterization. So as you saw on the previous slides, pretty much all systems have some form or shape of SCR. And we get this question often, which I'm sure many of you will. Our calibration team will come to us and say, hey, I'm using the same SCR system and these two different vehicle platforms. I'm getting very high efficiency on one, but the other one I cannot make it to work. So what's going on? And so after digging some, we found that the engine out NOx levels on the two programs were quite different. And in one case, potentially it could be due to the amount of EGR usage or other reasons. Didn't dig deep into that, but the whole idea, basic fundamental study, was to understand impact of engine out NOx. And this study was done on a reactor using core samples. So we basically had two different levels of feed gas into the system. On the left side, you can see a 500 ppm graph, engine out NOx, alpha ratio of 1.2. So urea dosing was 600 ppm. On the right side is 50 ppm engine out NOx or feed gas. So an order of magnitude difference with same alpha ratio. So the first graph here, or the first slide here on this topic, shows x-axis is time, y-axis is ammonia storage on the catalyst. And because we are dosing 600 ppm ammonia versus 60 ppm ammonia, you can see that the storage level rises very fast in the case of the high engine out NOx example. And we also did it for 3 different NO2 to NOx ratios, and as you all know that the 50% is one of the best NO2 to NOx ratios for the urea for the SCR reaction, and you will notice this in the results. So clearly you can see that the storage is very fast when you are dosing more urea, which makes sense because the core samples have the same size and you are dosing more, so you get more storage. The next one now is a NOx conversion as a function of time. So on the x-axis we have time, on the y-axis we have NOx conversion. Now because if we were targeting a fixed amount of conversion, so let's say 80% NOx conversion in this example, you can see that for the high dosing quantity we can achieve it in a much shorter period of time versus the low dosing of ammonia, which achieves that same 80% in a much longer period of time. Of course, in all graphs you will notice the 50-50 NO2 to NOx ratio shows the best result or achieves the highest conversion. So the point of this is during transient behavior, if your engine out NOx is different, even though you think you are targeting the same alpha ratio, so to you think that your dosing is the same, it actually does matter, and in transient behavior you will get a slightly different performance in result. Or even if you were doing semi-transient but not waited long enough, you will see a difference in. So continuing on the same note, now we have NOx conversion as a function of ammonia storage. And if you look again on the x-axis for both graphs, storage is now on the x-axis and conversion on the y-axis. In the previous charts we had time. The top graph is the high engine out NOx 500 ppm case, and the bottom graph is the 50 ppm case. Now in this case what we are trying to show is if you target a fixed amount of ammonia storage, so you are targeting whatever that 0.025 is on the x-axis, you can achieve that in 0.5 minutes with the high dosing, as you already saw that the storage rises very fast. However, the conversion efficiency at a given ammonia storage is more for the low engine out NOx case, which also makes sense because you have the same amount of coverage, you have the same amount of active sites, you have less NOx, so there's less competition for the NOx, so it can get higher conversion with the low engine out NOx, while for the high engine out NOx, you get less results. So I think these are very minute, sensitive points which during calibration we have to keep in mind. Otherwise, we get confused to say, hey, why are the. So finally, on this topic, the last slide essentially again shows the same thing. NOx storage on the x-axis, conversion on the y-axis. The point of this slide is that in either case, with this 50 and 500 ppm NOx example, you can achieve the target efficiency, whatever, let's say it's close to 90%. However, the amount of storage needed for the engine out, high engine out NOx is higher than the case of the low engine out NOx. And so if your engine out, if your storage level of 0.02 delivers 90% conversion in the low engine out NOx, you may have to go to 0.2 for high engine out NOx. And that is a very key consideration when you are doing calibration. If you are targeting a fixed ammonia storage on the catalyst over the cycle, well, that target needs to be adjusted based on engine out NOx to achieve whatever efficiency you're targeting. Right? So we did this for 50 ppm and 500 ppm. Well, there were some examples where that theory didn't apply. So we extended the range to another further than that. We went to 800 ppm and even 1200 ppm. And in this case, as you can see, on the x-axis we have time, on the y-axis we have NOx conversion, and up to 500 ppm things were quite similar between the 200, 500, 250 and 500. But with 800 and 1200 ppm, the conversion actually did take a hit. And so there is a limit to beyond which the engine out NOx can be compensated by the same catalyst. Now, of course, if you increase catalyst size, change the copper loading or the washcoat loading, you can make a difference. But this is an example where you are varying engine out NOx on a fixed system. We also studied the transient behavior. So ammonia NOx conversion versus ammonia storage for two different space velocities. And focusing on the left side with 30K space velocity, you can see that the transient behavior clearly shows a very big separation as the engine out NOx starts to increase. Up to the 500 ppm, again, the curves are not maybe changing so much, but with 800 and 1200, there is a much gradual increase in conversion efficiency as a function of ammonia storage. And increasing the space velocity makes, of course, the matters worse, and the separation becomes even bigger. So the points, I guess, just to make sure I didn't miss anything: higher space velocity, we get lower NOx conversion, significant NOx conversion decrease observed under transient state. Space velocity has a big impact. And and so this, as I mentioned, was on reactor, and these are small core samples. Everything is very uniform, temperatures are very controlled. In full-size systems, on top of all this, you can have ammonia distribution issues. So you might actually start slipping from some corner of the catalyst sooner or later than in a very uniform flow. So all these transient behaviors actually get even enhanced or maybe worsened in case of controls and calibration, which you may have to keep in mind. All right, so that was SCR characterization. As we move towards SCR on filter, which is potentially our future technology for Bharat Stage 6, now you are doing SCR and DPF on the same filter. So we get this question often that, okay, now you have NO2 in the system. SCR requires NO2, and I know some previous presentations mentioned that. And then DPF also has passive oxidation with NO2. So what will happen in terms of the competing reactions? So we tried to study the impact of soot on DNOx performance, and we also studied the effect of DNOx on soot oxidation. So the first graph actually shows impact of soot loading. The solid line in the graph is with no soot in the system, and the dashed line is with 8 gram per liter soot loading. X-axis is ammonia storage or ammonia loading. On the y-axis is NOx conversion. The red is NO only, and the blue is NO plus NO2. Now, NO in general does not contribute to the passive soot oxidation. So we also have NO plus NO2 with a 50% ratio. And as we saw from this data, we did not see any significant impact on NOx conversion of the soot in the system. Presence or absence of soot did not really impact NOx conversion significantly. The previous graph is with NO in the feed gas, and as we already said, okay, NO does not contribute. Maybe there is some local NO oxidation to NO2, but NO really is not the contributor for passive soot. So we studied the impact of NO2 on soot. Now this graph is result is without ammonia oxidation, ammonia in the feed gas, but we also studied with ammonia in the feed gas. And it's a busy graph, so let's just focus on the black trace, which is for CO. X-axis is time, y-axis is concentration, and if you will notice that the black trace starts to increase in level around 160, 170 seconds. And if you look at the red trace, which is the temperature step, you will notice it's around 300 to 400 degrees range. So the point being with NO2, there is passive oxidation happening as is expected. Obviously, the after 500 seconds, which is about after after 500 degrees C, which is about 240 seconds, clearly there is an increase in CO, which is due to the O2 reaction. As we added ammonia into this feed gas, the results actually changed such that the soot oxidation reduced because the NOx reduction took precedence with the ammonia. The only way we could enhance the passive oxidation of soot was to increase the NO2 concentration beyond the 50% ratio. So once the ammonia NOx reaction happened with the NO2, the excess NO2 actually did participate in passive soot oxidation. So overall, I guess the message I am trying to convey is that the precedence of reaction seems to be for the NOx, and it's secondary for soot for passive oxidation. I think personally, I think that's the preferred way. I would have liked it because I have the oxidation mode of soot through the oxygen reaction at the higher temperatures. Passive oxidation, of course, helps to reduce or mitigate the frequency of soot oxidation or DPF regeneration. But in general, I would rather have my NOx control happen on the SCRF, and then I can take care of the soot oxidation through my active regeneration. But also there is, you can enhance the NO2 to take advantage of both reactions. I do want to mention that if you look in literature, because this is a very, very active topic, you will find some papers actually going the other way, where in their testing they found completely opposite results. And I am conjecturing at this point that this could be a function of technology. It could also be a function of some test conditions. But at the end, as you all know, I'm the authority on this, so what I say holds. I'm joking, of course. Like I said, I like to keep it light. It was the next thing we discussed was SCR on filter. So I want to discuss is SCR on filter light of test conditions. So now imagine the DOC or LNT system with the SCRF downstream. As you are going through a cycle, the DOC is doing whatever it can, LNT is doing whatever it can, but there will potentially be some slip of hydrocarbons and CO. And so one of the objectives of this work was to understand what the SCRF can do in terms of light off for these species. And remembering that there is no precious metal in it, that was the reason to investigate. So this slide shows SCRF light off performance. There are two graphs. Left side is a D-green system, right side is an H system. The results are not actually significantly different, so I'll just focus on one, and you can see the other is just an aged result of the degreened result on the right. So x-axis is temperature, y-axis is concentration. if we just maybe look at the C3H6 propene, you can see that the reaction does start, or there is some oxidation happening. But for most species like CO and C3H8 propane, there is almost very little reaction. There is even the propene reaction is partial oxidation, as you can see by the formation of formaldehyde and C, acetaldehyde, and then there is of course C2H4 in the species as well. Um, the conversion is very incomplete even all the way to 550C. So it's not surprise because SCRF is not a precious metal containing compound trying to oxidize all these elements, but it was important, I think, to understand the behavior. There was some NO reduction or NOx reduction, but we think that was maybe just because of SCR-LNT reaction, hydrocarbon SCR reaction, because there is hydrocarbons and NOx. And there was no N2O formation in this study, which was excellent because we don't want N2O. All right, so moving on to the next topic, particulate filter lessons learned. So this particular topic, I think, was a very interesting learning experience, and I thought it would be worthwhile sharing, as you know, uh, Mr. Sudarshan's previous talk about pitfalls that you can go through your put them in there. So this is just recapping that diesel particulate filters, how they work. I think most of you know, but the point here was to say that there are many ways of triggering a regeneration for filters. You can have, distance driven or engine runtime, fuel consumed, soot simulation, or pressure sensor reading to trigger a regeneration when you think that your filter is full of soot and ready to regenerate. Um, in this particular study, we used delta pressure sensor as a live sensor to predict how much soot is in the filter and trigger a regeneration. Now, if you do not calibrate the model well and you over predict the soot loading, you will be regenerating very frequently, which you don't want. And if you don't, if it doesn't trigger frequently enough, you can overload the filter and cause other issues. So calibration of this is very important. Well, we did all that, and found were some test vehicles were behaving very oddly. And I'll try to show you on the x-axis it's time in seconds, on the y-axis is soot loading in grams, and on the left side, and on the right side is vehicle speed and back pressure in hectopascals. So let's start with the uh, red curve, which basically is the predicted soot mass. And when the vehicle started in the morning, we were at about 25 grams of soot loading, and within 25 seconds there was a jump in soot, and it jumped all the way to 70 grams or so. Now we have all those protection points, as you know, that you can regenerate up to this point. Then your customer is given a warning to try and regenerate on their own. If they still don't do that, then you have to go to a dealer and get a service regeneration. Well, we skipped all those stages, and it came to a point where the DPF warning was like it's too overloaded and you have to do something aggressive like replace the DPF. So these are development vehicles, so we didn't have to go through all that, but that would have been the result. And so we were very surprised. Well, we took the DPF off. We thought, okay, maybe something happened on the engine. We took the DPF off and weighed it. We found there was only a 1 gram increase of soot than what it had on the previous night, while the model was saying that it was a big jump. Well, so just to show you where it happened, if you look at the blue trace, which is the pressure reading, the soot jump happened because the pressure sensor reading jumped up, which is the blue trace. And we also noticed it happened right at the time when the driver kind of accelerated the vehicle. So the scale is not showing it very clearly, but on the right, as you can see, that you went all the way, the driver went from a very low speed to 50 kilometers per hour. So that was the phenomena we observed. We observed it on a few vehicles and frequently enough that we had to investigate. So what we found in summary was that after some sort of a highway driving, when you park the vehicle overnight and typically in high humidity conditions, and the next morning you did a cold start with an aggressive acceleration, this phenomena happened. And practically we investigated each of those conditions individually to see if it was a critical step. and practically each one of them was a critical step. You had to have some highway driving, you had to have some soak period with high humidity, you had to start cold with a heavy acceleration. You miss any of those steps and this phenomena would not happen. So repeating was a challenge, but and you know, in any investigation, you have to repeat the phenomena before you can, you know, root cause it. So with all that, what we found with each step, we tried to look into the segments of the DPF to understand what's going on. And I don't have the best pointer because of the laptop, but I'll try to show you here. So typically the soot forms a channel inside as it's depositing. And when we were doing the soaking, we started noticing, okay, so after a highway driving, we started noticing that there was a gap between the soot uh, and the wall of the DPF. And this gap was not there originally before the highway driving. It would be more like this, adhered right to the wall. After an overnight soak, we saw a lot of this kind of concave shape soot formation as if it was bulging at its ends. And then under high acceleration conditions, we found that this soot, bulge soot basically collapsed, causing the high back pressure. And we were able to repeat this phenomena on multiple vehicles and demonstrate that that's what's happening. So we basically root caused, and then now we can put some protection steps in place to say, okay, if those conditions are happening, beware, and we could put some sort of a safety factor in the vehicle. We also tried to investigate what else could be how we could prevent it. And one of the things we thought was, let's test coated and uncoated DPF. And so on the left side, you see the uncoated DPF images. On the right side, those are coated. Even in coated, we tried to do zone coated DPF and uniformly coated DPFs. And on the bottom left, basically it shows a summary of this phenomena. But the gist of this slide is that without the coating on the left top, the uncoated DPF did not show this separation or did not show the soot collapse. On the right, we could repeat this, duplicate the phenomena both in coated and uncoated DPF. So one of the conclusions was that maybe there is some in situ NO2 that's needed to cause this soot separation from the wall. Even though there is NO2 coming from the DOC, it was not actually contributing enough to the uncoated DPF to cause the separation and the collapse. With this, we decided to continue to do the testing on SCR on filter. Now, our hypothesis was because SCR on filter does not have precious metal, it probably does not form the in situ NO2, which is more like the uncoated DPF, and we did not expect to see a soot jump. And our research or our testing basically confirmed that. On the right side bottom, you can see there's no gap images. On the right side, rightmost figure on the right side, you can see there is a gap. That one is with precious metal, and the one on the left side is without the precious metal or SCRF, and so we confirm that, which is a good thing because now we have to deal with one less item for SCRF. Okay, the last item on my topic, and I know I have run way over my time, but hopefully we are okay. So I know my talk is so interesting that you're so absorbed. Okay, so we'll talk considerations. So after doing all this, now you have to diagnose the system. And after, it's almost like, you know, climbing the Mount Everest, you suddenly realize there is another Mount Everest right next to it that you have to climb to. And so what this portion of the slide presentation is generally just highlighting the challenges involved, not providing any solutions yet, but just the fact that now as the emissions are getting stringent, and this seems to be an eye chart, so I'll just maybe point out to you what the figure in the box is trying to show is the blue charts are for ULEV 125. The first blue column is ULEV 125, so your NOx plus hydrocarbon needs to be 125 milligram. This is for US emissions as an example. The middle bar graphs is basically the OBD limit. The multiplication factor for OBD2 is 1.75. That leads to makes it 219 milligrams. So between 125 and 219 is when your diagnostics will come into play. And if you exceed 219, then you have to turn on the mill. The difference between the two is what's shown on the rightmost side. and the blue bar basically shows the difference between a good part and a bad part. This is the separation you have when you are doing the diagnostics. As the emissions get more stringent, so I'll jump to the yellow bar basically, which is ULEV 30, then you have the multiplication factor and the diagnostic limit is in the middle, and then the rightmost is again showing the separation. So you can see from ULEV 125 to ULEV 30, your separation is getting smaller and smaller. OBD is the same, EOBD is the same thing, which is basically the chart on the left showing that from 180 milligrams, now you're down to 140 milligrams for a Euro 6 system. So the fault size representing separation between the best performing unacceptable part, or what we call BPU, versus the worst performing acceptable WPA in terms of emission performance is reducing. Uh, so for SCR efficiency, there is various ways to monitor. Not simply, but one of the ways is to put a NOx sensor engine out, NOx sensor downstream of SCR. You take the separation and you know what's your NOx conversion, and you can measure the efficiency. There are many other ways where people are using maps. They expect certain efficiency downstream of SCR, and the NOx sensor downstream of the SCR measures the actual number and compares the two. You can intrusively actually inject urea and see the behavior of the catalyst, and that's another way to diagnose. But at the end of the day, you are still using all these sensors, and there are many challenges related to that as well. Efficiency of these sensors is subject to cross sensitivity, so the NOx sensor is very cross sensitive to ammonia, so your readings are impacted by ammonia slip. The sensor themselves have accuracy of plus minus 10 to 15%, which for 100 ppm reading means 10 ppm. But if you are trying to measure 10 or 20 ppm, now you have a high level of inaccuracy involved. There are reversible poisons and urea deposits that can happen temporarily, which also induce false failures, which of course as an OEM we never want, because hurts the customer, hurts the warranty. And just monitoring in-use performance ratio is going to be another challenge for the your separation is decreasing. It used to be this much, now it's this much. Now when you go to the optimized CO2 strategy, that the separation is reducing even further because your efficiency went up. So just like I said, not really providing any solutions here, but giving a heads up that this Euro Bharat Stage 6 architecture and other challenges with diagnostics as well. So just concluding, various architectures are expected to come into production, and many are under investigation for these Bharat Stage 6 solutions. For high engine NOx, higher ammonia load is required to achieve the same catalyst performance. Very high engine NOx ultimately cannot be handled by a given catalyst size, and you will have to either compensate by bigger size catalyst or other solutions. Presence of soot has minimal impact on NOx conversion and ammonia storage. Jokes apart, I would like to say that this is typically what we are finding, that the NOx conversion takes precedence over soot oxidation, and I also feel that that is the desirable solution, because I would like to make sure my NOx reduction happens, because soot I can take care of through active regeneration. On the other hand, if you can enhance the NO2 formation, you can actually take care of both simultaneously. Soot-loaded filter, passive oxidation, high humidity, high acceleration, all those cause that soot jump phenomena, which was a very, very, I would say, intriguing and interesting study that we did, and was actually appreciated by a lot of people because they had experienced this phenomena and were not able to understand why this was happening. Fortunately, this is not happening in SCR on filter because of absence of in situ NO2. There are various SCR efficiency monitoring strategies, but all are subject to errors, which creates additional complications. The OBD thresholds are getting smaller, and the fault size between the best performing unacceptable and worst performing acceptable part is reducing. And finally, higher fuel economy and more stringent emissions are producing near convergence of these parts and reducing the separation. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mital. We have time for a couple of quick questions. I see some here on my right.